what it is. I said I was gonna come back and do a quick little live. You know what I'm saying? For the Telepathic Thursday. You already know. I need another motherfucking T word. I'm like, what talk about telepathic? I like that. But yeah. Hope everybody having a cool day, cool afternoon, cool evening, cool night. Kick back and listen. Grab your weed, grab your drink, and let's learn something.
Man sits in a soundproof room.
Up, 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 up. You know I gotta turn on this.
The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
Thanks, computer. Time to get telepathic. Well, this car is automatic, systematic. It's hydromatic. Well, this grease lightning. Well, this live is telepathic. Let's go.
A man sits in a soundproof room. He cannot see. The two halves of a ping pong ball taped over his eyes turn the world into a soft, blank pink. He cannot hear. The headphones are playing a steady wash of white noise that swallows every other sound. He cannot touch the person he is supposed to be receiving from. That person is in another building, in another room, staring at one of 4 images a computer chose at random. The man in the chair could be you. The protocol does not care. For 30 minutes, the man describes whatever drifts through the pink light behind his eyes. Then they show him the 4 pictures, and he points to one, the way you would if you were sitting in his chair. He is right about 30% of the time. Chance says he should be right 25%. The difference between those two numbers, the gap a skeptic dismisses with a shrug, is the most stubborn fact in modern psychology. 5% over chance, across 4,700 sessions, trillions to 1 against luck. And the man in the room could be you. He is, in most variations of this experiment, what you are, an ordinary person with no special training, picking up a quiet signal you have been told does not exist. The scientist who has watched this number refuse to die for 50 years is a Princeton-trained physicist named Dean Radin. He has worked at Bell Labs, run experiments at the University of Edinburgh, and is now the chief scientist at an institute most people have never heard of. In 2025, he published a book titled The Science of Magic, How the Mind Weaves the Fabric of Reality. Even though Radin is at the forefront of researching magic from a scientific standpoint, he keeps a bent soup spoon on his desk to remind himself how little he understands. In this video, 3 things. You will see what the laboratory has caught, in numbers a statistician cannot deny. You will see why every one of those experiments is about a quiet ability you have already used and dismissed. And you will leave with 3 categories, 3 names, that let you sort every strange experience you have ever had into something you can think clearly about. Ready? Let's do it.
This is an artificially aware original production.
That 5% is the entry point. Not because it is impressive, it is not. A skeptic will tell you correctly that 100% telepathy would be impressive. 5% over chance is barely there. It is a faint glow at the edge of a screen. It is a number you could miss if you were not looking for it. But it does not go away. It did not go away in the 1970s, when the experiments began. It did not go away in the 90s, when 6 independent laboratories ran the protocol and confirmed it. It did not go away in the 2000 teens, when researchers selected for people with prior psychic experiences, and the number jumped to 45%. It is still there, quietly, across 50 years and thousands of trials, refusing to behave like a fluke. Radin's argument is simple. There is a difference between the existential question, does this exist, and the efficacy question, how big is it? Skeptics confuse the two. They look at 5% over chance, decide that it is not big enough to matter, and walk away, taking your permission to think about it with them. The trillions to 1 statistics that say the effect is real never enter the conversation. But the effect is the thing. The size of the effect is the next question. And the effect divides into 3 categories, 3 names, old names, dressed up in new equipment.
divination.
The first category is divination. In the magical tradition, this was tarot, scrying, dream reading, augury. In the laboratory, it has different names: telepathy, clairvoyance, remote viewing, presentiment, precognition. The vocabulary changed. The thing being measured did not. You have done it. Almost everyone has. The most commonly reported psychic experience in the world is not levitation or seeing ghosts. It is a precognitive dream. You dream of someone.
Oh, shit.
Someone you have not spoken to in a year, and they call you the next morning. You wake up with a sense of dread before the phone rings with bad news. You think of a song and it comes on the radio. You laugh and tell yourself it is a coincidence, because that is what you were taught to do. Rodin's lab measured the same thing, not as a coincidence, as a signal. The classic experiment is called Ganzfeld, German for whole field. The man in the pink light at the beginning of this video is in a Ganzfeld chamber. The protocol is 60 years old. The total number of sessions run by different research groups worldwide is now in the tens of thousands. The hit rate across all of them sits stubbornly above chance. When you select for people who have already had spontaneous psychic experiences or who have a close emotional bond with the sender, the hit rate rises into the 40s and 50s. Not the kind of numbers you can hand wave away, the kind of numbers that would make any other field of psychology celebrate. So why have you never heard of this? Because saying the words out loud carries a professional cost. Because the academic culture in the United States and Europe treats this material the way it once treated continental drift or hand washing in hospitals, as something a serious person does not discuss. In India, Rodin notes, the reaction is the opposite. He has lectured at universities there where academics ask him why he is wasting his time running experiments. They already know it is real. The same data, the same effect. Two cultures, two responses. The phenomenon is not changing. The permission to see it is. There is another version of this experiment that should never have worked. It is called presentiment. The viewer sits in front of a screen. Every few seconds, the computer flashes an image, sometimes a neutral image like a chair, sometimes an emotionally charged one like a snake or a car crash. The computer chooses randomly. The viewer's skin conductance is being measured. Their pupils are being measured. Their heart rate is being measured. Here is the strange part. The body reacts to the emotional images before the computer has chosen them. The arousal response, the small spike in skin conductance that tells you something startled the nervous system, shows up a few seconds before the image appears. Across multiple labs, across thousands of trials, the body somehow is leaning into the future and flinching at what it sees there.
Ooh, that's deep.
The window is small, milliseconds to about 10 seconds, sometimes longer in remote viewing protocols where trained subjects describe locations or events that have not happened yet, months in some cases. Verified after the fact. This is not a metaphor. This is a measurement. Your nervous system, the thing you call you, is not strictly locked to the present moment. It is bleeding forward in time by a few seconds in ways that can be picked up by skin sensors and a stopwatch. You have felt this. The moment before the car in front of you brakes hard, you have already begun to release the gas. The instant before someone says something cruel, the air feels different. You have called these things hunches and chalked them up to micro cues. Maybe some of them are. The data says some of them are not. When you next get that feeling, the one that has no source you can point to, you are not being superstitious. You are picking up signal from a window the laboratory has now measured.
Enchantment. Enchantment. Enchantment.
The second category is enchantment. In the old language, this meant casting a spell. In modern terms, manifestation, mind over matter, intention. The laboratory name is psychokinesis, often abbreviated PK, or more soberly, mind-matter interaction. This is the one that makes a physicist nervous. Because if it is real, the wall between the inner world and the outer world, the wall on which most of modern science is built, has a door in it. Radin has spent the better part of 2 decades trying to find the door. Here is the experiment. You shine a laser through 2 narrow slits in a barrier, microns wide. On the other side, you put a screen. The laser, against intuition, does not produce 2 dots. It produces a striped pattern of light and dark bands, what physicists call an interference pattern. The pattern only exists because in the quantum world, the laser is behaving as a wave, exploring both paths at once. Now, and this is the part that has tortured physicists since 1927, the moment you measure which slit the photon went through, the interference vanishes. The wave collapses into a particle. The act of observation changes the result.
The double slit experiment.
Nobody knows why. The most famous interpretation, proposed by John von Neumann, refined by Eugene Wigner, both of them giants of 20th century mathematics and physics, is that consciousness itself does the collapsing. Your consciousness, the thing you call you, looking out from behind your eyes, that awareness is the thing that turns possibility into actuality. Most physicists treat the interpretation as too weird to mention in public. A few, quietly, have tried to test it. If they are right, you are part of how the universe collapses possibility into actuality. Every time you open your eyes, Radin is one of them. And in 2023, he ran the version of this experiment that broke open his career. He recruited 100,000 applicants online. He filtered them through questionnaires, attention tests, video interviews. He was looking for 2 groups, experienced meditators and practicing magicians. People who had spent years training their attention inward and people who had spent years training their attention outward. 50 made it through, about 25 in each group. He built small interferometer boxes, laser, slits, photo detector, and shipped 1 to each participant. Their job, sitting at home in front of the box, was simple. For 30 seconds, focus your intention on the apparatus. For 30 seconds, relax. Repeat. The detector recorded the light pattern the entire time. The meditators produced a tiny effect, just barely measurable. The magicians collapsed the wave function at odds of 4 quadrillion to 1 against chance. 4 quadrillion to 1. This is not a marginal anomaly. This is a number that, in any other field, would be a Nobel Prize. 2 groups of equally serious practitioners, both trained for years in disciplines that look identical from the outside, and one of them moves a needle in the physical world while the other does not. Radin's theory of why is interesting. Meditation, he says, is an inward practice, attention pointing in. Magic, in the working tradition, is an outward practice, attention pointing out, toward an object, a candle, a sigil, a goal. When you ask both groups to influence a box out there, the people who trained on out there win. The skill is real, and the skill is specific. You have parts of this skill in their dormant form. You have wished for a parking spot and gotten one. You have stared at someone across a room and watched them turn around. You have noticed that things go well in the periods when you are thinking clearly and badly in the periods when you are spiraling. You have called these things confirmation bias, and sometimes they are. The data says they are not always. The mechanism is small. The mechanism exists, and it appears to be trainable. Decades ago, Radin attended what was called a PK metal bending party. The premise was absurd on its face. A group of people, mostly amateurs, would sit in a room with cutlery, attempt to enter an altered state, and try to bend the spoons with their minds. He went in as a skeptic. He left with a spoon. It is a heavy soup spoon, the kind that takes serious force to bend even with both hands. He bent it between two fingers, with pressure that should have broken his knuckles before it touched the steel. He remembers the moment clearly. He remembers more clearly that he had no idea how he had done it. He keeps the spoon on his desk. He calls it a paranormal object. He says, with a scientist's careful phrasing, that he keeps it there to remind himself that the limits of what is possible are not where he was told they were. He is not selling you a technique. He is showing you a piece of bent metal he cannot explain. You have one of these too. A story you do not tell at dinner parties because you cannot make it sound serious. The clock that stopped the moment your grandmother died. The object that moved when no one was in the room. The dream that named the name. You have filed it under coincidence, or under I must have misremembered, because the alternative does not fit the world you were told you live in. Radin's argument is not that every such story is real. It is that the threshold for dismissing them is set far too low by a culture that has decided in advance which experiences are allowed to count. The spoon sits on his desk. It is permanent. It is impossible. It is also just a spoon. The third category is the one that makes you, and almost everyone else, most uncomfortable. In the old language, it is called theurgy. It refers to the practice of working with what the practitioners describe as non-physical intelligences, spirits, deities, ancestors, archetypes. In the modern lab, it shades into research on channeling, intention transmission, and what Radin calls blessing studies. Stay with this. The experimental work is more careful than the framing suggests. The first study he ran involved chocolate. Small pieces of chocolate, blessed by a Mongolian shaman and a Buddhist monk, were sent to participants under double-blind conditions. The participants did not know whether they were eating blessed chocolate or unblessed chocolate. They ate it. They reported their mood for the next week, the way you would in the same study, with no clue which group you were in. The blessed group reported significantly elevated mood. The results survived peer review. The reviewer, a well-known neuroscientist named Jim Fallon, later wrote that he had to read the paper 5 times before accepting it. The methodology was airtight. The statistics were appropriate. The blinding was correct. He did not believe the result, but he could not find anything wrong with it. He approved publication. Radin and his collaborators extended the study. Blessed tea. Same effect on your mood, even when you did not know your tea had been blessed. Blessed water used to grow plants. The plants did better. Blessed water used to feed stem cells in culture. The cells thrived. Blessed water used on glioblastoma cancer cells in a petri dish. The cells died at a higher rate. Same protocol, same double blind, different targets, consistent results in the direction of the intention. What is going on here is not provable from the outside. Radin would be the first to admit that. The mechanism is unknown. The effect sizes are small. The studies need to be replicated. There is no theory yet that explains why a piece of chocolate held in a monk's hands for 15 minutes should land differently in a stranger's nervous system a week later. But the data exists, and the implications, if it holds, are unsettling. Particularly for the people who run blessing rituals professionally and have been told for centuries that what they are doing is symbolic. The studies suggest it is not entirely symbolic. The studies suggest that intention leaves a residue on objects, and that the residue can be detected by other nervous systems, and that the residue can shift the behavior of cells in a dish. None of this requires the belief of the person receiving it. The chocolate eaters did not know which group they were in. You have done versions of this without naming it. meal someone made you with care tasted different than the same meal eaten alone. The object you were given by a dying parent feels different in your hand than an identical one from a thrift store. The bed you sleep in after a fight does not feel like the bed you slept in the night before. You have called this projection. You have called it memory. You have called it imagination. Maybe. Some of it almost certainly is. Radin's experiments are pointing at a quiet possibility, that some of it is not, that a small portion of what looks like projection is actually pickup, that objects retain a faint signal of the attention they have received, that the world, at some low level you have been told to ignore, is more alive than the cold physics version of it can account for. One of the most striking moments in Rodin's career happened with a single participant in one of his earliest interference experiments. The man was a Swami, head of a yogic society, 70 years of daily meditation behind him. Rodin explained the experiment. The box would be in a shielded room, 2 floors away. The Swami's job was to focus his attention on it and influence the photons inside. The Swami did it. His result was extraordinary, far beyond anything Rodin had seen from ordinary participants. When the trial was over, Rodin asked the question every honest experimenter asks: how did you do it? How did you project your mind into the shielded room and into the apparatus 2 floors away? The Swami looked at him. "I did not go anywhere," he said. Rodin pressed. "What do you mean?" "I went inside, because the universe is inside." It is the kind of answer a Westerner trained in physics laboratories has been taught to discount as poetic. Rodin had the same training. He took the answer seriously anyway, because the Swami's interpretation maps almost exactly onto certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, where the distinction between observer and observed dissolves at the deepest level, where every measurement is a relationship, not a separation, where the line you have been taught to draw between in here and out there is convenient for ordinary life and false at the level the physics is trying to describe. The Swami was not making a metaphor. He was describing how he did the experiment. You have touched this. In moments of stillness, staring at the ocean, holding a child, looking up at a sky you forget to look at, you have felt the seam come loose. The inside and the outside briefly stop being separate. You have been trained to call this a feeling. The Swami calls it a fact. The data is closer to the Swami's side than your training has let you admit. I believe. There is a story Radin tells about the magicians versus meditators study that should not work and does. He had the design. He had the participants. You can guess what happened next because you have lived versions of this in your own work. The colleague who was going to build the interferometer boxes and pay the $25,000 materials cost pulled out at the last minute. The funding evaporated. Radin had a grant that was going to pay for 1/2 of the work, but not for the boxes. He was about to cancel a study he had spent 2 years preparing. A week later, while he was still sitting with the problem and no solution in sight, an email arrived from a European group he had never heard of. Their name was RENCEP, the Research Network for the Study of Esoteric Practices. They were inviting him onto their advisory board. He accepted. He asked what they had in mind for scientific collaboration. They had, they said, 25,000 euros set aside for a single experiment. Did he have a proposal? He sent them the proposal that afternoon. They funded it. 25,000 euros, slightly more than $25,000 at the exchange rate, the exact amount he needed. From an organization devoted to the study of magic, arriving precisely when his magic experiment was about to collapse. He puts this in the book, dryly, as in typical magical fashion. You have one of these stories too. The job offer that arrived the week you were going to break. The stranger who said the sentence you needed to hear. in the language you needed to hear it in, the morning after you asked the question. You have called these coincidences. You have called them luck. You have called them anything except what the magicians and the Swami and the parapsychologists call them. Confirmations that the model you were handed, where everything is separate and nothing reaches anything else, is missing pieces. Maybe they are coincidences. Maybe some of them are not. If you're a skeptic listening to all of this, you will say, fine, 5% over chance, tiny effect sizes. Most of these studies cannot be replicated with 100% reliability. If any of this were real, we would all be reading minds and bending spoons and curing cancer with our intentions. The fact that we are not means the effect is either fake or trivially small. Radian's answer is the aspirin analogy. Aspirin is in your medicine cabinet right now, almost certainly. It has been used as a medicine for hundreds of years. Its mechanism, how it actually works in the body, was not understood until the 1970s. When you measure the effect size of aspirin in modern clinical trials, it is tiny. So tiny that if aspirin were submitted to the FDA today as a new drug, with its small effect and its side effects, it would probably not be approved. But aspirin works. The effect is small. The effect is real. The effect is medically meaningful at scale. The smallness of the effect tells you nothing about the reality of the effect. The other analogy he uses is Benjamin Franklin. In the 1740s, Franklin was flying kites in storms and seeing tiny sparks at the end of the string when lightning struck nearby. He had no idea what the sparks were. Neither would you in the same field with the same data. He could not have guessed that 200 years later, your entire civilization would run on those sparks, refined, channeled, multiplied a billionfold. He could not have guessed that the small thing he was watching was the entire next era of human capability, waiting to be understood. What Radin is showing you is sparks. The mechanism is unknown. The theory is incomplete. The replication problem is real. None of that is an argument against what is being seen. It is an argument for understanding it better. The skeptic who looks at 5% over chance and decides nothing is happening is making the same mistake Franklin's contemporaries made when they watched the sparks and saw nothing useful. You are living at the beginning of something. Not the middle. Not the end. The beginning. Messy experiments and small effects are exactly what you would expect at the beginning of a field, not evidence that the field is empty. Here's what to carry out of this video. You do not need to believe anything. Belief is not the takeaway. 3 names are divination, your mind reaching across space and time, the dream that comes true, the premonition of danger, the hunch you cannot explain. The next time one of these happens, you do not need to call it a coincidence, and you do not need to call it destiny. You can call it what the laboratory now calls it, a divinatory event of unknown size with a measurable signature in the nervous system. You can note it, you can write it down, you can see if it repeats. You become an observer of your own data. Enchantment, your intention influencing the world outside your skin. The wish that worked. The focused attention that bent a small piece of a system you were not touching. The next time you notice this, the moment when concentrated attention seems to produce a small disproportionate result, you do not need to dismiss it, and you do not need to inflate it. You can call it enchantment. You can note it. You can see what conditions amplify it. Theurgy, your awareness reaching into something that does not have a body in the ordinary sense. The presence in the room after a death. The voice that gave you the answer in the dream. The blessing that landed. You do not have to settle the metaphysics. You can use the category as a sorting tool, a place to put experiences you would otherwise have to discard. The skeptic who told you these experiences were impossible was working from a physics that is 100 years out of date. The skeptic who told you they were delusions was working from a psychology that was never tested against the people having them. The skeptic was confident. The skeptic was also wrong about the things you have already lived through. You do not need to believe Radin. You need to stop letting other people tell you what you have already experienced did not happen. The man in the soundproof room is still there. He has been there for 50 years. He sits with the ping pong balls over his eyes and the white noise in his ears and the small pink light behind his lids. And he is right about 30% of the time when he should be right 25. 5% over chance. Trillions to 1 against luck. The most stubborn fact in modern psychology. He is not exceptional. He is not chosen. He is a college student picking up a flyer for extra credit. He is your neighbor. He is, in most of the variations of this experiment that have ever been run, completely ordinary. He is you in a room. So here is the question. What is your 5%? Where in your life has the number refused to behave like chance? The dream that named the name. The phone that rang the second you thought of them. The object that moved. Of how little he understands.
I know that shit. What the fuck? That was at the end of it.
Life has the number refused to behave like chance. The dream that named the name. The phone that rang the second you thought of them. The object that moved. The blessing that landed. The hunch that saved you. Tell me in the comments. Specific. One incident. The one you have never told because it does not fit the world you were told you live in. You are lying in bed, lights off, your body is heavier than usual. Your thoughts are starting to drift, but you can still hear the room. The radiator, the street, your own breathing slowing down. You don't know it yet, but you are exactly one step away from doing something a 43-year-old radio executive named Robert Monroe spent 30 years documenting. The only thing between you and the next stage is a switch you've never been told exists. He found it by accident. Then he found out you could turn it on deliberately. Then he wrote the manual. In 1971, Monroe published Journeys Out of the Body, the most detailed civilian account of how to leave your physical body that has ever been put on paper. Not a memoir, not a theory, a procedure. 5 steps, documented across hundreds of attempts. Tested in a hospital EEG laboratory by a psychologist with a PhD and a clipboard. Monroe was not a mystic. He sold radio stations for a living. He treated this the way an engineer treats a piece of equipment. He reverse engineered the door. In this video, I'm going to walk you through his 5 steps in order. What the first one is, and why you have already touched it tonight, without noticing. What the second one feels like, the part most people refuse to describe out loud. How the actual separation works, what the second body can do. And the wall, the one specific wall that turns most people back the moment they realize the door is real. Ready? Let's do it.
This is an artificially aware original production.
Monroe did not go looking for the door. The door came looking for him. March 1958. He was 43 years old. He was lying in bed beside his wife when a beam of light struck him. That is the word he uses, struck, from a direction he describes as roughly north. His body began to shake, not from outside, from inside, a vibration with no source. He thought he was having a stroke. He went to his doctor the next morning. His doctor found nothing. He went back to bed that night, and it happened again, and again, and again, for weeks. Then one night, while it was happening, he felt himself drift sideways and looked down at his own body from the wrong side of the ceiling. He thought he was dying. He waited to die. He did not. He came back. Then he went to a different doctor, a psychiatrist this time, because in 1958, this was not something a businessman talked about out loud. The psychiatrist also found nothing. Monroe was sane. The experience was real. Most people in his position would have filed it away and gone back to work. Monroe did not. He spent the next 13 years treating the experience the way he would have treated a broken transmitter. He kept logs. He varied conditions, diet, sleep position, temperature, time of night. He noticed which combinations produced separation and which produced nothing. He learned how to bring the state on at will. He learned how to come back. And in 1971, he published the procedure, not as a spiritual practice, as an instruction manual, 5 distinct steps. Each one has a specific feeling, a specific failure mode, and a specific way to know you are in it. The first step is the easiest to identify because you have already done it. You will do it again tonight. The question is whether you'll notice. Before the steps, the conditions, Monroe found that the procedure works under specific physical settings and almost never outside them. The first condition is fatigue without exhaustion, tired enough that the body wants to shut down, not so tired that the mind shuts down with it. The second condition is temperature. The room should be slightly cool, cool enough that you would want a thin blanket. Heat sedates the mind, cold keeps it alert. The third condition is darkness, total if possible. Any source of light gives the attention something to track, which keeps it locked to the eyes, which keeps it locked to the body. The fourth condition is the one most people skip. Monroe specifies that you should remove all metal from your skin, watch, rings, jewelry. He does not explain the physics. He explains the data. Sessions where he wore metal failed more often than sessions where he did not. He recorded it, and he passed the recording on. Use that information however you want. He also notes, almost in passing, that mid-afternoon worked better for him than late night. Whatever the reason, the body's resistance to the state was lower in daylight than in darkness. Worth knowing before you decide when to try.
Mind awake, body asleep.
Monroe's first step has a name. He calls it Condition A. In plain language, mind awake, body asleep. Your body is the part of you that sleeps. You can verify this the moment you pay attention. Your body goes through specific shutdowns every night. Heart rate drops, muscles unhook from the nervous system, temperature falls. That is what sleep is, mechanically. But the part of you that is aware, the awareness behind your eyes, does not have to shut down with it. Most nights, it does. They go offline together. You experience that as falling asleep. But there's a narrow window where they come apart. Your body has already begun to power down. Your awareness has not yet followed. For a few seconds, sometimes longer, you exist as a mind that has nothing physical to do. No movement, no sensation in the limbs, just attention in the room. You have been here. You have felt your legs go far away. You have felt your face stop belonging to you. You have felt the bed widen and the ceiling rise. And almost every time, within seconds, you have crossed over. You have fallen asleep. You did not realize the doorway was open. You were standing in it.
That's deep.
Monroe's first instruction is to stop crossing. Stay there. Let the body go all the way under, but keep your attention awake. He gives a very specific technique for this, and it is not what you would guess. He does not tell you to focus harder. Focusing harder activates the body. He tells you to think of one thing, a single image, a single phrase, and let the body sink underneath it. The image becomes a kind of anchor. The body falls away from it. The attention stays on it. He calls this holding a single thought against the descent. You do not need to do anything sophisticated here. He recommends at first simply lying still and watching the descent happen without falling into it. That is step one. It sounds passive. It is the hardest of the 5, and Monroe was emphatic about that. Almost everyone who tries fails on the first night, the second night, the third. Then one night they don't. The body drops, the mind stays, and the next step begins. This is the part most people do not describe out loud. Once the body is fully under and the mind is still awake, Monroe writes, something happens that has no equivalent in ordinary experience. A vibration begins. He does not mean a tremor. He does not mean a tingle. He describes it as a roar, a heavy, low-frequency oscillation that fills the entire body at once, as if every cell were being shaken by the same wave. He compares it to the hum of an electrical current at industrial scale. In his early accounts, he was terrified of it. He thought he was being electrocuted in his own bed. He thought it was a seizure. He thought it was death. Over time, by repetition, he learned 3 things about it. The first thing he learned, the vibration is not happening to the body. The body is asleep. Whatever is vibrating is something else, something the body normally contains. The second thing he learned, the vibration is the gateway. Without it, no separation occurs. With it, separation becomes possible, but only if you let it complete. Most people, the first time the vibration arrives, panic and snap awake. The mind reattaches to the body. The window closes. Monroe says this is the single most common failure point in the entire procedure. You waited weeks for the door to open. The instant it opened, you slammed it shut. The third thing he learned, you can adjust the vibration. You can speed it up by mental command. You can slow it down. You can move it along the length of the body, head to foot, foot to head, like running a hand along a vibrating string. He recommends doing this deliberately the first few times. not to accomplish anything with it, just to confirm that you have control of it. Once you know you have control, the fear drops. And the moment the fear drops, the separation becomes available. But how do you induce it in the first place? Monroe is specific. From step 1, mind awake, body asleep, you reach toward what he calls the borderline. The body is gone. The room is quiet. The mind is alert but doing nothing. From this position, you do not push. You do not strain. You hold attention on the closed-eyed darkness in front of you, the field behind your eyelids, and you wait for it to deepen. The darkness goes from gray to a black with a different weight to it.
Where should you invest $100 to?
From gray to a black with a different weight to it. When the field deepens to the second kind of black, you direct your attention to a point about a foot above your forehead. Not your forehead, a point above it. You hold attention there. He warns this is delicate. Push too hard and the body wakes up. Hold too loosely and you fall asleep. The correct effort is the effort of looking at something in your peripheral vision without turning your head. Light, constant, disinterested. If the procedure is working, the vibrations begin within a few minutes of holding that point. They start at the head. They spread downward. Within seconds, the whole body is in them. That is the bridge. From there, step 3 becomes possible. Monroe describes 2 methods of separation, and he is specific about which one to use first. The first method he calls the lift out. You imagine yourself rising slowly upward, not your body, you. Just attention, lifting away from the bed. He warns that this method has a high failure rate for beginners because it requires a clean mental image and steady will. The second method, the one he recommends, he calls the rollout. You imagine yourself simply rolling sideways, the way you would turn over in bed. You do not push, you do not strain, you simply allow the motion. The first time it works, Monroe writes, the sensation is unmistakable. You feel yourself turn, and then you feel yourself continue to turn, past where the bed would have stopped you. You roll out of the body, the way a hand slides out of a glove. His first deliberate test was crude. He was not sure the first time whether the second body was a hallucination, whether he was in fact still in bed, imagining the whole thing. So he tried to push his finger through the floor. He writes this very plainly. He pushed his finger downward. It went through the floor. He felt the floor. He felt the underside of the floor. He felt beneath that the joist, and beneath the joist, the empty air of the room below. Then he panicked and snapped back into his body. He sat up. He looked at his hand. The hand was intact. The floor was solid. And the only honest conclusion he could draw was that whatever had just pushed through the wood was not the hand. It was something else, something his hand normally hosted, something that could be in 2 physical states depending on which body was currently in use. That is the doorway. That is what is on the other side of the vibrations. It is not a hallucination, and it is not the body. It is the thing the body was holding.
Second body.
Once the second body is out, Monroe says, the question is what it can do. The answer is more than you would expect and less than the movies would suggest. The second body moves by intention. You do not have to walk. You do not have to fly in any deliberate sense. You decide where you want to be, and you are there. The movement is not instantaneous in a magical sense. It has a felt duration, a kind of sliding, but there is no physical effort. You do not get tired. There is no air resistance. Monroe describes early experiments where he attempted to move across his own bedroom, then his house, then the street outside, then a friend's house several miles away. The friend's house was the test he most wanted to perform, because it provided something the bedroom could not: verification. He could go there, observe what was happening, return to his own body, write it down, and call the friend the next morning to ask if his description was accurate. He did this many times, and he reports the results plainly. Sometimes the descriptions were correct. Sometimes they were wrong. Sometimes they were partially right, accurate in atmosphere, but wrong in specific detail. He did not claim 100% verification rate. He claimed something more interesting. The second body, he writes, does not perceive the physical world the way the eyes do. It perceives a layer that overlaps the physical, but is not identical to it. Sometimes the layer is in tight register with the room, and the description he brings back is correct. Sometimes the layer drifts, and what he sees is mixed with something else, something his mind contributes. Knowing the difference, he writes, is the actual skill of the practice. The return is simpler than the exit. To return, you think about your body. The second body falls back into it almost immediately. The vibrations subside. You open your eyes. The room is as you left it. The clock has moved forward, sometimes by minutes, sometimes by an hour. You are back.
The wall.
Step 5 is the only step Monroe wrote about with something resembling caution. He calls it different things in different chapters, but the simplest name for it is the wall. The wall is fear, not a metaphor, a specific, identifiable, repeatable wall that almost every practitioner encounters within the first 10 attempts. It does not arrive during the easy parts. It arrives at the moment the procedure is actually working. The moment the body is fully under, the vibration is at full strength, and the separation is about to begin. At that instant, something in you decides this is too far. Monroe describes it as a feeling that no description prepares you for, the conviction, sudden and total, that if you keep going, you will not come back.
Right, that's bullshit. That bullshit.
He writes about this carefully because the conviction is wrong and the consequences of believing it are well documented. Practitioners who hit the wall and turn back do not lose anything. They wake up. The next morning, the body is fine, the mind is fine, the procedure can be tried again. But practitioners who hit the wall and turn back 20 times in a row, he writes, develop an automatic reflex. The wall arrives, the body slams the door becomes harder to open the next time. The fear trains itself. Monroe's own first encounter with the wall is recorded in detail. He had been separating successfully for months. He was confident. He decided one night to attempt a longer trip, further from his body than he had ever gone. The vibrations came on. He rolled out. He began to move. And somewhere out past the edge of the house, a feeling arrived that was unlike anything in his prior experience. He describes it as the certainty that something was watching him, not a presence, a category. The conviction that the act of being out of his body had attracted attention from something that he could not name and was not equipped to encounter. He turned. He went back. He was in his bed in seconds, body shaking, awake. He did not attempt a separation for several weeks afterward. When he tried again, the wall was easier to recognize because he had a memory of it. He describes the lesson plainly. The wall is real. The wall is also not what it appears to be. What it appears to be is a threat. What it actually is in his model is the boundary the body uses to keep the awareness inside it. So Monroe's instruction at step 5 is specific. The first time the wall appears, do nothing. Do not push through. Do not fight it. Do not retreat. Just observe it. Let the wall be there. The wall, he writes, is the body's last defense, the same circuit that fires when you stand on the edge of a high place and feel your legs lock. It is not protecting you from death. It is protecting you from doing something the body was not built to understand. Once you observe the wall without reacting to it, it begins to recede. The vibrations continue. The separation completes. And you discover, on the other side, that the wall was the boundary the procedure was designed to cross.
8 nights.
You do not have to take Monroe at his word. Between December 1965 and August 1966, a psychologist named Charles Tart ran a controlled experiment on Monroe in a hospital EEG laboratory. He wired Monroe to an electroencephalograph. He placed a 5-digit random number, generated after Monroe was already in the building, on a high shelf 2 meters above the floor in a separate room. The instruction was simple. Monroe was to enter the state, leave his body, travel to the room with the shelf, read the number, return, and report it. Monroe spent 8 nights in the laboratory. The conditions were difficult. Sleeping in an unfamiliar bed, wired to equipment, surrounded by recording instruments. For 7 nights, nothing useful happened. On the 8th night, Monroe entered the state twice. He did not read the number. What he did do was describe, accurately, 2 people in another part of the building. A female technician on duty, and a man with her whom he later identified as her husband, neither of whom he had seen, neither of whom he had been told about. Tart confirmed the descriptions afterward. The EEG showed brain activity that matched neither waking nor ordinary sleep, a mixed pattern of theta and alpha, the same range Tart later recorded in another subject during a successful out-of-body event. Tart did not publish a conclusion that out-of-body experience is real. He published the data, the protocol, the conditions, the result. and let other researchers replicate or fail to replicate. What matters about the test is not the verdict. What matters is that the procedure Monroe wrote down in 1971 was specific enough to be brought into a laboratory and tested under controlled conditions, and produced information Monroe had no ordinary way to obtain. The manual works, not always, not reliably for everyone, but the door is real. The procedure for opening it is documented, and the documentation is now over half a century old.
All right. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.